that you're alive.
I'm glad I did leave.
Good evening and welcome to the U.S. Coast Guard Air Station in Clearwater, and welcome to Surviving the Storm, a Storm Teammate special. I'm Chief Meteorologist Steve Jerve. Tonight we're going to help you and your family get ready for the upcoming 2014 hurricane season. We're coming to you from Hangar 2, the Coast Guard's home to huge C-130 aircraft, search and rescue planes, like the one you see here. But these amazing aircraft aren't alone. It's also home to 9 Sikorsky MH-60 Tango model helicopters, but it's no joyride when a hurricane threatens. Coast Guard pilots and crew risk their lives to save others and play a life and death role in surviving the storm. Semper Paratus, the Coast Guard motto, and Latin for always ready. Since its start in 1789 with its first lighthouse, the Coast Guard has been in the business of safeguarding people who live and work on the water. In 1848, the life-saving service was established. Just a dozen years after the Wright brothers' first flight, the Coast Guard began using aircraft as part of its two-part mission of search and rescue, SAR for short. Coasties, the nickname for Coast Guard men and women, have operated some unusual amphibious aircraft and helicopters over the years.
Mayday, mayday, mayday!
When the Maydays came in those early days, planes like the single-engine Corsair and N2 biplanes answered the call. The Grumman Duck JF-2 amphibians, like this vintage model at Lakeland's Fantasy of Flight, had a search range of nearly 800 miles, cruise at 155 miles per hour. The Coast Guard kept in step with aviation advances. General Aviation's flying lifeboat carried a crew of 4 and a 1,100-mile search range. Here's one taking off near the old pier in downtown St. Pete. Other vintage planes included the Viking 001 Flying Bathtub. Pontoon planes were very effective as search planes, including the Grumman HU-16, which could search out 3,300 miles. This plane was called the Albatross. But air crews opted for the nickname the Goat, and later, while fixed-wing planes did the searching, the Coast Guard relied on helicopters to handle much of the rescuing. And the Sikorsky HH-3F Pelican, a huge helicopter with an amphibious hull. In 1934, USCG Air Station St. Pete was commissioned at Albert Whitted Airport. Over the years, crews went out on SAR missions, saving lives and keeping watch in times of war and peace. But after a while, the Coast Guard outgrew Albert Whitted.
In 1976, they actually moved to the airport here in Clearwater because the C-130 came online and the runways weren't big enough at Albert Whitted to accommodate them, so they moved up here in the late 70s. Helicopter pilot Commander Kurt Cuppersmith flies one of the 9 MH-60 Sikorsky Tango model helicopters based in Clearwater. The choppers work with the 5 C-130 search planes. Usually these men and women are working in the worst weather conditions. I think probably the worst thing is people, when you know the water's cold and they're in the water and it's nighttime and you're looking for them, that's probably some of the, you want to get out there as quick as you can to try to give them some assistance.
Drivers right below cabin door.
Air Station Clearwater performs more than 400 search and rescues each year, and last year saved more than 1,500 lives, besides stopping illegal drugs from reaching our shores. The work is dangerous and difficult and brings new challenges each day.
Everything always changes. The weather changes, the mission changes. It's great job satisfaction too, knowing that you're helping people out there on the water that are in trouble too. So that's kind of motivation to come to work every day.
Coming up, El Nino's role in storm forecasting. Plus, ride along on a C-130 search mission. This year's forecasters are predicting an Atlantic hurricane season with below-average activity. Researchers at Colorado State University expect a total of 9 named storms. 3 of which to become hurricanes and only 1 a major storm, Category 3 or higher. NOAA is forecasting 8 to 13 named storms, 3 to 6 hurricanes, and just 1 or 2 major hurricanes with winds of 110 miles per hour or greater.
All other tropical storms must bow before El Nino.
Chris Farley played it on Saturday Night Live in 1997, but meteorologist Lee Spann wanted to know how much anyone really knows about El Nino's effects on hurricane development.
Do you know what El Nino actually is?
Actually, no, I don't. El Nino is a warming of the Pacific Ocean that causes weather pattern changes throughout the world.
Exactly. Typically, strong winds from the east push the warm surface water of the Pacific toward Indonesia and Australia, allowing cooler, deep water to upwell near the South American coast. But during El Nino years, those east winds relax and the warm surface water retreats back toward South America.
For the eastern Pacific Ocean. And during this year, we're seeing those temperatures starting to increase.
That water temperature rise affects the world and Tampa Bay.
Usually, during an El Nino year, it increases the jet stream across the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean.
The stronger jet stream can rip apart or weaken hurricanes in the Atlantic.
If El Nino does develop this year, it would actually peak during the winter, which means it may not have a lot of impact in the early months of hurricane season.
Historically, Tampa Bay has been affected by early season storms. Last year, Tropical Storm Andrea formed in June. The year before, it was Debbie. Now, after hurricane season, our El Nino winters typically have more severe weather.
February of 1998, we were in still a strong El Nino pattern, and we saw a record tornado outbreak.
The Climate Prediction Center issued an El Nino watch as the chance of El Nino increases.
El Nino is Spanish for the Nino.
One of the main reasons that draws people to live and vacation in Tampa Bay is its location on the Gulf of Mexico. With its inland waterways, barrier islands, and warm Gulf waters, it's a virtual paradise in the sun. But in a hurricane scenario, this water could rise up and destroy large parts of the region.
Well, you've heard me say it for 6 consecutive years. Tampa Bay is one of my nightmare scenarios. It's one of my greatest concerns, not only because of its storm surge threat, but because people there haven't been impacted by a big hurricane in a long time. So now, if a hurricane impacts that area, we'll have a very strong message and graphic to help drive that home so that folks in Tampa can protect their life and property.
That graphic has been in the works for years and is called the Potential Storm Surge Flooding Map. And it looks to answer, in the simplest form possible, how much water could be at your home at a certain time of day with a particular storm.
This will be a more visible, clear to understand storm surge product, and it will help answer a couple key questions that I don't think we've provided the answer for very well in the past. One is, how far inland from the beach could the storm surge flooding occur? And in some places that could be not just blocks, but miles.
In the past, we sort of forced people to go through this mental exercise of figuring out where they were relative to mean sea level and doing the subtraction. And now we've taken all of that out, and we're just flat out showing you how deep the water can be, which is, at the end of the day, all anybody wants to know.
What type of parameters have you put into the model in order to get the data that you've got?
So we take a whole host of parameters from the hurricane forecast. Obviously the track and intensity, but we also have to know the size, the forward speed, and then the angle at which it's going to approach the coastline. The angle really makes a big difference.
In this simulation using USF data from Hurricane Ivan in 2006, that storm would have inundated Apollo Beach with 20 feet of water. What does that mean to people when they see the storm surge could be 20 feet? What does it mean? I mean, I think it's confusing.
It is, and the old way required you to ask that question. The new way, I stand 6 feet tall, so 20 feet would be 14 feet over my head. So obviously I could not survive those conditions, because it's not a gentle 20 feet, it's a violent 20 feet with waves and currents, and I mean, it's not survivable. That much water is not survivable.
The Coast Guard Air Station in Clearwater has one of the largest areas of responsibility anywhere in the service. They cover the Gulf of Mexico from the south part of Florida to the British Virgin Islands and all the way down to the Lesser Antilles. And they couldn't do that without aircraft like the C-130 Hercules. Jeff Patterson recently went along on a training mission, and he shows us how the aircraft performs when things go bad on the water.
The C-130 is one of the most versatile airframes in the military, used as everything from a gunship to a cargo plane. The Coast Guard uses the C-130 for search and rescue, and on this day, they're taking us for a ride to show us how it's done.
Mostly it's training for our air crews. There's a lot of coordination that happens between the pilots and the crews themselves.
The pilots and air crews of the Coast Guard train constantly, getting things just right under ideal conditions so they can do the task when things aren't going so well, like in a hurricane.
He's going to be on gunner's belt, you're going to be on gunner's belt, she'll be on gunner's belt.
Before the aircraft takes off, the crew conducts a briefing going over each detail of the mission.
First, we're focused on safety would be first, before we even open up.
The training mission involves flying over the Gulf of Mexico and over a contract vessel on the water, dropping practice gear.
Drop.
As close as possible to the surface boat.
Today was a practice gear to simulate what we have on board the plane. On board the plane we have a combination of both life rafts, survival gear, we have spare rations of food and water, and dewatering pumps and radio equipment as necessary, depending on the nature of the SAR case.
Often the SAR cases, or search and rescue cases, aren't as smooth.
Where it might be business as usual for us, we acknowledge that it's probably the worst day in the lives of the mariners that we're trying to assist.
They practice each task over and over.
Drop. It just sets us up for if it happens in the middle of the night.
Petty Officer Justin Smith says, even with experience and practice, when it's the real deal, their hearts are pounding a little faster and the adrenaline is flowing.
You're focused on just getting it right the first time.
And sometimes after those rescue missions, the crews will actually hear back from the people they've saved.
We constantly get letters back from survivors. It's very common to see the life rafts or the PFDs, personal flotation devices, mailed to the unit.
They get letters, they get cards, they get thanks for saving lives.
It makes it all worth it, really.
Just part of the mission of the U.S. Coast Guard. Jeff Patterson, News Channel 8.
Coming up, a look back at the fury of Hurricane Charlie 10 years ago. Hurricane Charlie. It's hard to believe it's been 10 years since the Category 4 hurricane carved a path across the state after making that unexpected turn, barreling into southwest Florida. "2004 was a bad year for hurricanes in Florida. 4 storms hit the state, 3 of them major hurricanes. The first that year, Charlie, was the worst storm since Donna in 1960 for western and central Florida. After passing western Cuba, the storm entered the Gulf and was bumped east by an upper-level trough and forecast to hit Tampa Bay. Instead, the storm turned east and struck Punta Gorda as a Category 4 hurricane with 150-mile-per-hour winds.
A lot of lessons came out of Charlie. I think the most important one is you can't count on the forecast being absolutely perfect. The cone is there for a reason. You have to believe in the cone. And so that means that if you live in the cone and if the storm were a little bit off but still in the cone, that could happen and you need to be ready for that.
The storm was compact, so the storm surge was minimal. But Charlie's powerful winds tore a path of destruction that went right through Hardee, DeSoto, Highlands, and Polk counties. The damage was catastrophic.
The other thing that Charlie reminds us is that hurricanes are not just coastal events. Just think of how far inland that wind damage went along the path of that very small hurricane.
Charlie eventually passed through the eastern part of Orlando, still carrying winds of 100 miles per hour. Many had gone to the city to escape the storm on the west coast. All told, Charlie caused over $15 billion in damage and was responsible for 29 deaths in Florida. It was so bad that its name was retired, along with Francis, Ivan, and Jean from the same year. For most of Tampa Bay, the storm was a near miss, and showed the difficulty in pinpointing where a storm may come ashore.
In Charlie, people weren't ready, emergency managers weren't ready, nobody was ready for the storm staying to the right side of the cone. In actual fact, it was a better than average forecast. And people need to really take that to heart and understand that in our lifetimes, we're never going to get this perfect. And any storm that comes up the west coast of Florida could be a little right or a little left, and a little right especially makes a tremendous amount of difference on who gets the big storm surge. That's the lesson of Charlie.
And for those in the Tampa Bay area, you were fortunate that it went farther south. The next time you might not be so fortunate.
Hurricane Charlie was a deadly storm and caused billions in property damage. Jeff Patterson heads back to the spot where Charlie made landfall to relive the day with those who survived the storm.
After moving across the Caribbean and across Cuba, Charlie built into a massive Category 4 hurricane with winds of over 150 miles an hour. As the storm hit, we drove in, watching trees fall and homes blow apart.
The wind is now shifting.
It's the most powerful storm I've ever been in. After experiencing the heavy winds, we found people whose lives were turned upside down.
I just never thought this would ever happen.
We found an Ace Hardware on US 41 demolished. Further down the road, the mobile home communities of Park Hill and Eagle Point were in ruins.
I'm 83 years old, you know, you can't just pick up and leave.
Because in every direction you turn, there are destroyed homes.
Downtown Punta Gorda suffered significant damage. So we went back to see how things look today.
It's something you almost want to forget and not remember.
Helen Torgensen was visiting relatives when the storm hit. She returned 3 days later to find devastation.
Is part of storm recovery emotional recovery?
Yes, it is. Very much so.
The mobile home community has now been restored, but after Charlie hit, some people moved away and never came back.
Be careful, it's slippery and it's all glass.
Just after Charlie hit, we also met Joan Green and her sister, Sally Ryder. They took us into their condo and showed us where they rode out the storm.
We just kind of joked back and forth because the fear was so intense that whatever we said came out funny.
Joan Green has moved back north. Her sister is back in the same condo complex.
I would never do it again. That was very dangerous.
It took 2 years for her to be able to move back into the condemned complex. After the hurricane, the renovations took time.
I really don't remember much. I think the trauma probably took it all away.
Sally Ryder says she learned a lot from Charlie.
If it happened, I would know. I'd be much more prepared.
She says she would pack a bag and leave sooner if she had it to do again.
We spent a lot of time after Hurricane Charlie right here. There was a gas station on this corner. Miraculously, there was a car stuck on a lift here. There was a bank on that corner, and across the street was a shopping plaza. While a lot of Punta Gorda has returned, some businesses never did.
I'm challenging you, yeah.
In the days after the storm, we also met Punta Gorda City Council member Marilyn Smith Mooney, who challenged us to come back after the storm to see the progress.
I do believe that we have such a heart in this city. You're going to see miracles.
So we came back.
The last time you were here, I remember we had to be careful where we were walking, stepping over pieces of gutter and metal flashing and everything.
She says the town had challenges.
Government is slow to move.
But she says a public-private partnership with the group formed after Charlie helped. Business owners and real estate investors formed Team Punta Gorda. They did everything from paying for landscaping to paying thousands of dollars in private money for a redevelopment master plan.
All they knew was the longer this town was out of commission, the lower their market values were going to go.
And she says Punta Gorda is back.
Anybody that had a good, viable business before had a good, viable business after.
Things in downtown Punta Gorda certainly look a lot better than when I was here 10 years ago. Jeff Patterson, News Channel 8.
I'm here with Coast Guard Petty Officer Bobby Wandell, and Bobby, it's great to stand next to these helicopters. This thing looks like a gun, but it's not. It's actually a weather station. It's observing weather, right?
It's a PDOT tube. It looks like a gun, but it's actually an indication of airspeed. So air will come in, and it'll actually indicate to the pilots how fast they're going.
And then what happens if you're flying into a very strong wind? Does it kind of mess up what the pilots know how fast they're going?
It could mess it up, but as long, we have dual redundant PDOT tubes, so it's
one on
two
each
different
side.
computers, one
Right.
on each side, and we have two computers, and it takes those computations together, and it'll actually take like the median, and it'll go off one of them.
Coast Guard helicopters, who knew? Official records of hurricanes date back less than 200 years, but obviously they go back much longer than that. A partnership between the University of South Florida, Florida Gulf Coast University, and the National Weather Service is attempting to assemble a record of hurricanes that go back thousands of years, all by going deep in the ground.
We're looking for buried treasure.
But in this case, the treasure is data.
Our hurricane record goes back about 160 years. Here in the Tampa Bay area, we have a recorded hurricane back in 1848, and that's about it. With these core samples, we can go back thousands of years.
The samples are taken from the bottom of a pond or lagoon that's next to a beach and sand dunes. When a hurricane storm surge pushes the sand over the dunes, it leaves a layer at the bottom of the pond.
You should see the organic dark, like dark brown, even to black organic rich sediment with these perturbations of sand.
Florida Gulf Coast Dr. Joanne Muller and her students are collecting these core samples.
We push the aluminum pipe into the lagoonal sediment, and we cap it at the top to create pressure, and then we just pull it out.
How deep are you going?
Well, at the moment, with that system, we're able to core about 2.5 meters.
The preliminary data already shows a trend.
That we've had an inactive period in the last 500 years, but the 500 years prior to that shows much more activity.
Dr. Jennifer Collins from USF will use the patterns found in the core samples and relate them to climate patterns.
And then we can make some observations of, well, these are the climate patterns, say, when we had an active period. So, hey, we're starting to get these climate patterns, and we can start making those kind of predictions.
The storm surge from tropical storms and hurricanes takes its biggest toll on the areas where it makes landfall. As News Channel 8's John Rogers shows us, Sarasota County has a new plan to restore a storm-damaged shore.
Sarasota County has 35 miles of prime real estate that attracts visitors from around the world. Its beaches are a prime economic driver for this area. When you come here, all's right with the world. But sometimes, all is not right with the world. When a big storm looms in the Gulf, the waves eat away at the Sarasota County coastline. A couple of years ago, the effects could clearly be seen at Robert Duato's backyard.
Well, we lost probably right where we're standing, we lost about 2 feet, but you can see we lost up to 12 feet over there.
After Tropical Storm Debbie hit the area in 2012, he spoke with News Channel 8. He said Debbie had enhanced an ongoing problem. Over the years, the sandy beach behind his home had eroded.
Years ago, there was just a gradual slope. There was no drop off at all. It was just a nice, wide, beautiful beach.
And it's a problem county officials know all too well. Experts say 2/3 of this county is considered critically eroded.
The amount of damage and destruction that can occur from a major hurricane, as many areas can attest to, can be truly devastating.
Laird Reeford is the Sarasota County Coastal Resources Manager. For years, he and a team have been working on what's called a post-disaster redevelopment plan. It's a sort of instructional guide on how to respond after a storm strikes. Reeford said while wind damage could leave destruction in its wake, some of the worst damage would come from storm surges and flooding.
Flooding as well as property damage can change the whole landscape of the Gulf shoreline area.
Just take a look at this chart. Starting with a Category 1 hurricane, some flooding would appear inland. But the stronger the storm, the higher the surge and the worse the flooding is going to get. That leaves a lot of damaged homes and ruined businesses. So before disaster strikes, a plan is necessary to rebuild.
We have to be as prepared as we can. And I guess that's probably the most active thing that we can do.
The post-disaster redevelopment plan would help lawmakers decide where to put federal disaster money. And it would also include procedures on how to help homeowners and business owners rebuild. The last time Sarasota County was hit directly by a hurricane was back in 1946. It was nearly hit by Hurricane Charlie back in 2004, but that doesn't mean we should rest on our laurels.
We dodged that bullet, but no telling whether, our bullet is coming this year or next year or 10 years from now.
But with a post-disaster redevelopment plan, the county will be ready for what happens. In Sarasota, John Rogers, News Channel 8.
Business owners, like homeowners, must think about hurricane preparation. A recent study found companies with no business recovery plan only have a 10% chance of surviving a disaster. Lee Spann shows us a first-of-its-kind data storage facility that can help.
You may have seen these domes along I-4 near Lakeland and wondered what they were. Well, so did I.
This particular facility is the first in the industry of a commercial record center. We believe that once the people become aware of this, that it will become a standard.
Built less than 2 years ago for $2 million, the Smart Dome Vault can withstand 300-mile-per-hour winds. The construction has a foot of reinforced concrete and a Kevlar exterior coating. Inside, climate control features monitor temperature and humidity, and it's all complete with a state-of-the-art fire suppression system. But why is all of this needed? To protect the backup records of local businesses.
But as a business owner, if you don't sit down and plan today for a catastrophic situation, you probably won't resume.
Backing up business data like invoices, client information, and billing, then storing it in an off-site facility can be critical to getting back to business after a hurricane.
When a disaster happens, the last thing people think about is running back into the building to get the data.
But you've got to have a backup plan.
Ansley Watson with McFarlane, Ferguson, and McMullen Law Firm knows to prepare for hurricanes.
10 years ago, it used to be about protecting the paper documents in our office. You get everything away from the windows.
But technology changed everything. Now their computer servers are in an off-site, secure location.
Data has become important. Client contact, maintaining the ability to communicate with your clients in a disaster such as a hurricane.
His off-site servers back up information daily. As a business owner, you could also have a service collect backup tapes from computers in your office. But being able to retrieve that data will let you return to business as soon as possible.
Out of all the electronic things we do, probably the least expensive and most cost-effective one.
Lee Spann, Storm Team 8.
Andrea was a tropical storm that blew past the Bay Area and made landfall on Florida's northwest coast. Even though it never reached hurricane strength, Andrea caused trouble here, spawning at least one tornado that ruined a restaurant, sent trees crashing to the ground, and caused widespread flooding. A good reason to make sure you're covered by flood insurance, even if you live inland. Take it from someone who should know. National Hurricane Center Director Rick Knabb.
I would urge people to get flood insurance, because your homeowner's policy by default isn't going to cover it. And there are so many ways that you can be vulnerable to flooding in Florida. So I would have a very open and frank discussion with your insurance agent about what your options are, what things are covered, what are not covered, the structure, the contents, if you own a business, if you own a boat. I mean, you really have to think through all of these issues.
I'm glad I did leave.
Welcome to the U.S. Coast Guard Air Station in Clearwater and Surviving the Storm, a Storm Teammate Special. I'm Steve Jerve. These hangars are home to the C-130 aircraft and Sikorsky helicopters flown by the brave men and women of the U.S. Coast Guard who risked their lives helping people trapped in a hurricane's path.
The MH-60 Jayhawk is a search and rescue chopper that allows the Clearwater Coast Guard to live up to its motto, anytime, anywhere.
Swimmer is coming out your 12 o'clock.
You've seen the dramatic video. Something terribly goes wrong.
They took a box overboard with them.
And before you know it, you're stranded, hoping for divine intervention or the Clearwater Coast Guard to toss you a lifeline.
Last year we saved over 1,500 lives and saved property. You know, we also, stopped the illegal drugs coming in as well. So we stay pretty busy at this air station.
So we wanted to know, what does it take to coordinate a rescue?
Anthony, you're part of the crew today, so if anything doesn't seem right, smell right, look right, feel free to speak up and ask questions. Don't be afraid to do that.
With the mission planned in hand, I set out to do search and rescue training in the Gulf of Mexico.
Our area of responsibility is all the way from Savannah, Georgia, and covers both coasts of Florida, the east and the west coast, as well as the Keys, all the way up to Apalachicola, Panama City area.
But on this day, the destination, St. Pete Beach, a couple of miles out from Johns Pass.
When we get on scene, we'll be about 300 feet, 3 to 4 foot seas, and about 10 to 15 knots of wind. Then once we get into a hover behind the boat, we'll be approximately 30 to 35 feet above the vessel.
With Eagle 8 soaring high in the sky, it's easy to see the rescue dangers of doing this delicate dance.
There's 2 pilots up front. One of them is the aircraft commander, and then we have normally 2 crew in the back. One's a rescue swimmer, and the other is a flight mechanic.
Over the next 3 hours, we would practice everything from launching and retrieving the rescue basket.
All right, putting the swimmer down.
To deploying the rescue swimmer from 40 feet above the ocean.
Most of it, we're going on very sparse information, like it could have been just like a mayday call they got.
I have a man in the water.
What they're dealing with this time is a feisty, floppy little floater they affectionately call SpongeBob SquarePants.
SpongeBob is basically partly a target for the pilot that simulates a survivor in the water, and therefore it also acts as a target for the pilot to have something to maneuver the aircraft for a pickup. It gives the swimmer something to swim towards. It gives me something to con the aircraft towards.
The training is immense, and so are the dangers for the Clearwater Coast Guard during hurricane season.
You can't prepare for everything, but when you practice a lot and you practice to do it right a lot, when things don't go quite the way you want, you're able to deal with surprises a little bit better when you're prepared.
The Clearwater Coast Guard will do this type of training 3 to 4 times a week. So when hurricane season comes, they'll be ready. With the Clearwater Coast Guard, Anthony Allred, News Channel 8.
I'm Storm Teammate Meteorologist Julie Phillips. Being prepared, it's the most important thing you can do each hurricane season, and smartphone apps are making it easier than ever before. Be sure to download the Storm Teammate Weather Max app heading into this season. It's free and will allow you to track the next storm heading for the Bay Area on the interactive radar and alert you when any warnings are issued for your county. Another great asset to have is the Red Cross smartphone app. Another neat feature this app has, the I'm Safe messaging. Using social media, it lets you broadcast to friends and family, letting them know you are okay after a storm passes. Before the storm, the app can help you locate open Red Cross shelters and even help you create your family emergency plan. Having flashlights in your hurricane kit should already be part of that plan, but it won't hurt to download the flashlight app for iPhones either. This ingenious app turns the LED light on the back of iPhones into a powerful flashlight. One thing you likely already have on your phone, social media apps. Twitter and Facebook in particular have become a valuable tool to keep more people in touch and informed. And as meteorologists, social media helps us send out life-saving information and receive detailed reports from our viewers like weather photos, damage reports, and observations.
They are fast, flashy, and best friends for countless Floridians. Coming up, helping the state's horses survive the storm. Did you know Florida is home to a $6.5 billion horse industry? Floridians enjoy thoroughbred racing to polo, show jumping, rodeos, and pleasure riding. Animals that can become threatened when a storm comes close. Meteorologist Julie Phillips has more on how horse farm owners keep these prized possessions safe during hurricane season.
For Patty Fiedler, the threat of a direct hit from a hurricane presents a unique and serious set of problems. She remembers what happened Labor Day weekend in '85 when Elena made a close call.
And you'll have barns that'll be like concrete and so forth, and they work well, but it's still, the standing water gets to the horses because they stand in stalls all the time and they can't get turned out, and there's no grass. You get floating ants, but yeah, Elena was tough.
Fiedler is head trainer at Amber Glen Equestrian Center in Pinellas Park, home to as many as 35 valuable horses. So having a hurricane plan is crucial. First step is decide whether to move inland south or head north.
We move all of ours as a group. So it's going to take us 3 days to get them into a farm, get them set up, get them ready to go, settled in. By then, the hurricane could have turned right, could have turned left, so it's a lot of planning.
After hauling to a safe location, 2 staff members stay with the horses 24/7. Horses are extra sensitive to pressure changes during storms, so they keep them calm by letting them eat. Fiedler has at least 10 days worth of feed on hand and suggests other owners do the same. Have a place to go, way to haul them, and plenty of supplies. Horse owner Julie Henley is ready.
I pretty much have my plan, so I'm good. And of course, there's always the concern for people that don't have the trailers, and of course, offer the support. Hey, you can come with us.
If you can't evacuate, an alternative is to make arrangements to turn your horse loose at a horse park or private pasture if there is one near you. But that's not part of Fiedler's plan.
I don't recommend it because at that point you've lost complete control of your horse. And let's say that you turn your horse out, that's just a nice little horse that gets along great with everybody, and then you have people who turn horses out that don't get along and they start fighting. There's nothing you can do.
Either way, bring paperwork to identify your horse after the storm passes. Horses can look very similar. That's why one of the most important things to remember is to have your horse marked and identifiable before the storm, so if anything happens during it, you can be easily reunited after.
Have some kind of identification in it, or braided in the mane, braided in the tail. They make really cool things now that are like the fur code that you put on your dog.
These waterproof tags can be scanned so your info will be online. List an extra out-of-state number so that if cell towers are knocked down, someone can still be reached. Storms are unpredictable, but Fiedler's horses can continue to trot around the ring with confidence, knowing if storms threaten, a solid plan is in place. Julie Phillips, Storm Team 8.
So much of the forecast data is collected by the NOAA Hurricane Hunter aircraft headquartered at MacDill Air Force Base. As Lee Spann tells us, a new display at the USF Library takes a look back at the history of that team and makes sure the data collected over the years remains safe.
So we're flying in and out of hurricanes, we're collecting radar data, flight level data.
The NOAA hurricane hunters go into the eye of the storm to get information needed for accurate forecasts.
You're trying to make sure that you're getting the most accurate data out and get it out timely because people are waiting for it now.
A new display at USF's library shows the history of how this information is collected.
We have the flight suit that they wear, an old flight bag which would have contained maps, and some drop-ons.
Some of the items on the display case here at USF are from the distant past and some from the not so distant past. Actually, until about 2 or 3 years ago, all of the data recorded in the Hurricane Hunter aircraft were put on these data tapes. Well, now they're put on a thumb drive.
Because the data on those tapes and in paper form could easily be destroyed, the $12,000 grant for this preservation display also helps preserve data the hurricane hunters collected since the 1950s.
Helping them archive old paper documents and data into digital form.
And this data contains very important scientific information that can be used by scientists here at USF, as well as the hurricane hunters and researchers around the world to understand the storm in a lot more detail.
Preserving the past means that we'll be better prepared for seasons to come. Lee Spann, News Channel 8.
Coming up on Surviving the Storm, Undersea robots, the next wave in hurricane forecasting. Reconnaissance planes, satellites, balloons are all used in hurricane forecasting. But Brian Bennett tells us about robots that work underwater to help scientists understand more about storms that form above the surface.
It looks like a scene from a science fiction thriller. Robotic gliders roving the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, but this isn't fiction, it's reality. Rutgers University researchers launched the Slocum glider on a successful mission across the Atlantic, collecting, transmitting environmental data along the way, thousands of miles offshore and depths from 1,000 meters or more. Scientists hope gliders like these will help forecast the power and direction of hurricanes. Now, several of these same gliders are in the hands of the marine scientists at the University of South Florida.
The beauty of robots is that they can be out there when people can't.
Engineer Chad Lemke gave me an up-close look in the St. Petersburg lab.
We have the buoyancy engine and pitch motor, which control the ability of the glider to propel itself through the water column.
These little yellow submarines are packed full of instruments. Those in the midsection gather the data. The tail section computer controls, a satellite transmitter, and an antenna.
21.0234 degrees C.
150 miles out in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico. We could type in a couple commands. When it surfaces, it would tell you what that...
Absolutely. Every time it surfaces, we don't get all the data back because satellite communications is expensive, so we parse the data. We get a smaller subset of the data, and it sends that back every single time it comes up.
Then the data is immediately put up on the web, where it is shared with NOAA and other researchers, vital information like salinity, temperature, wave heights, currents, on and deep below the surface. Gliders deployed by Rutgers researchers during Hurricanes Isaac and Sandy collected data that mirrored the outcome of those storms, but the information wasn't used.
Because those are experimental projects, that data wasn't incorporated into the hurricane prediction, but they feel in the future that if they would have been able to utilize that data during the hurricane prediction process, that the prediction models would have been a little bit more accurate.
Accurate predictions with help from a little yellow submarine that could one day soon help save lives. Brian Bennett, Storm Team 8.
That's all the time we have for now. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Again, to keep from becoming a storm victim, have a plan and practice it. Again, thanks to the dedicated people at the Coast Guard Air Station in Clearwater. Good night.